Okay, so what were the consequences of Europeans coming to the New World? This is a concept that we refer to as the Columbian Exchange, the interactions and what happened when the Europeans came in contact with the Native Americans. Well, the most important aspect of the Columbian Exchange was an exchange of diseases. The Europeans brought the plague and different kinds of poxes, and in turn, the Indians gave back to them diseases such as syphilis. And so there was a lot of death, and it was an ugly time, particularly for the natives who were almost entirely decimated by the European plagues. Then in terms of the gold, remember Columbus came, many of the explorers came looking for gold. Columbus didn't find a whole lot of gold. Later on, under Cortez, a good bit of gold was found. And so gold was a big part of the exchange. In return, the Europeans shared with the Indians, they shared gunpowder and some of their technology that was somewhat advanced for the natives. The natives introduced the Europeans to tobacco, to some other vegetation, various kinds of corn, that sort of thing. And the Europeans introduced the natives to some writing. Remember, the Indians had no written language. They had, in terms of maps and that sort of thing, they were somewhat primitive. And the cartographers, the map makers, actually at this time were at a loss as to whether we were actually in the New World or we were in the Indies. So they were trying to determine what to dub this new land. Columbus, on his deathbed, insisted that he had gone to Asia, to the Indies, but an explorer by the name of Amerigo Vespucci, who explored down particularly around South America, was quite convinced that this was not Asia, this was not the Indies, this was in fact a new world, Novus Mundus. And the cartographers, beginning in 1507, began to put on the maps the name of Amerigo Vespucci. They used the Latin America or Americus, and then they gave it a female ending, America. And perhaps if we use the regular conventions, we would be called Vespuccians, but indeed, Amerigo Vespucci's first name was put on the maps. Talk a little bit about why there was such a explosion or a race to explore and to claim the lands. Primarily, the kings and the queens wanted to expand their empires. So it was an urgency to get to these new lands and to claim them on behalf of one crown or the other. They were also looking for some kind of quick trade route, some way still to get to Asia very rapidly. There was a legend of something known as the Northwest Passage. The Northwest Passage was supposedly a route that you would catch somewhere on the east coast of America, and then suddenly, not too long, you'd be in China if you found the Northwest Passage. So they're looking for this special trade route to China. They're looking for gold, obviously, and in fact, they find gold. There's rumors of gold cities. There's rumors of places that have gold everywhere on the trees, and so those rumors of gold were highly motivational to the Europeans. Remember, some of the Europeans, like Isabella, were also motivated by a desire to convert, missionary efforts to convert the native peoples. Some of the explorers were motivated simply by trying to make a name for themselves, for personal glory, or perhaps a little intrigue, a little drama, a little stirring up of some fun, as it were. There was also a lot of improvement. We talked about the astrolabe, a lot of improvement in navigation and in the ships and the cartography, that is the map making. And so at this time, this is an opportunity for these navigators to try out some of their new science. Let's talk a little bit about who some of these most famous explorers were. Perhaps the most famous, the first one we talked about, Christopher Columbus. Although born in Genoa, Italy, sails on behalf of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain. He comes to the Bahamas in 1492, 5 years later, Cabot comes on behalf of Britain and discovers or settles into Nova Scotia, claiming that for Britain. In 1500, the Portuguese come to Brazil. To this day in Brazil, Portugal is the language, or Portuguese, I should say, is the language of Brazil. Ponce de Leon comes on behalf of the Spanish crown to Florida, allegedly looking for a place called the Fountain of Youth, some kind of water that prevents you from aging. I don't believe Ponce de Leon ever found it, but that's a piece of myth of our history. Balboa actually was the first European to go across the entire continent to see the Pacific Ocean in 1513. And then in 1519, we have the advent of Cortez, the conquistador who came to Mexico and subjugated the Aztecs, Montezuma, their king, and took much gold back to Spain. De Soto sailed up the Mississippi River, the first one to do so, in 1539, first European there. And then Cartier came down the St. Lawrence, which is up in Canada, in 1541, 2 years later. The English got into the act in about the 1570s and 1580s as some of their pirates began to explore and claim lands. Walter Raleigh, Francis Drake, John White, we'll talk a little bit about these men when we talk about Virginia. And then John Smith, one of the explorers who settles in Jamestown in 1607. 1608, a year later, Champlain comes and settles in Quebec, claims Quebec for the French. Henry Hudson, sailing on behalf of the Dutch, will settle up around what today is New York. And later in the same century, Father Marquette and his partner Joliet will settle into the Great Lakes region in around 1672, actually just exploring on behalf of the French. La Salle will claim Louisiana, the Louisiana Territory will eventually be called, in 1682 for the French. The main piece here, in terms of understanding early exploration, is that it was not the British, not the English, who had the largest hold on the new continent. It was indeed Spain. And although the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese had certain claims in the New World, Spain had the lion's share of the New World as far as the European claimants were concerned. Until, in fact, the Spanish and the British will get into a war of their own between each other. And that's coming up soon.